All right, we got to do it. We got to take a second and talk about this really terrible Supreme Court ruling about the gerrymandered congressional map for the state of Texas. Just know in advance, this video is not going to feel super great, but I think it's important, and I think that there are some big takeaways that I've not seen other social media creators or any news outlets discussing. I'm going to be referencing here an interview that Amy Goodman from Democracy Now! Did with Ari Berman, who is the voting rights correspondent for Mother Jones. I know I've been saying it all year. I think Mother Jones is doing really, really important reporting. And obviously, so is Democracy Now! So the conservative majority on the U.S. Supreme Court has basically cleared the way for Texas to use this horribly gerrymandered congressional map in the midterms. And as any of us could have predicted, the uber-conservative six, with their fringe unitary executive theory, ruled in favor of Texas, in favor of this incredibly gerrymandered map. They ruled in favor of denying people representation in government. Please understand, the uber-conservative six, they want to make Donald Trump a king. They are eroding democracy. They are undermining the Constitution at every turn. And the three other justices ruled in favor with democracy, in favor with the protection of our rights, in favor of civil rights, and they dissented against the six in the majority. Basically, a lower court ruled in a very understandable and legal way that this map was incredibly racially gerrymandered. There were estimates that it would deprive millions of Black and brown Texas voters of representation in government. And obviously the map was illegal. So the lower court ruled that they had to use the old map, which was already gerrymandered. It was already going through the courts for being gerrymandered, but was not as bad as this 2026 map. The lower court said, no, Texas, you cannot use this horribly racially gerrymandered map that Donald Trump strong-armed y'all into implementing in an off year. Right, in just the most overt attempt at cheating in the midterms. This is a desperate ploy from a desperate would-be dictator who knows that if people are allowed to have representation, the Republicans will lose. If people are allowed to have their votes counted and are allowed to have a voice in government, the Republicans will lose. So Republicans have to cheat. Donald Trump, Governor Greg Abbott, Republicans in the Texas House, cheaters. And a lower court said so. They're like, this is egregiously racist. But we know that the uber-conservative six have been working really hard to erode, destroy, dismantle the Voting Rights Act and deny, especially Black people in this country, representation, to make them silent citizens who do not have a voice in government. That's what the uber-conservative six has been working very hard at doing. In her dissent, Justice Kagan said, this court's stay ensures that many Texas citizens, for no good reason, will be placed in electoral districts because of their race. And that result, as this court has pronounced year in and year out, is a violation of the Constitution. Ari Berman of Mother Jones says it was an unsigned majority opinion. The uber-conservative six have been doing that all year. But Samuel Alito wrote the concurrence, shocking, basically saying that the Texas map was a partisan map, pure and simple. And remember, the Supreme Court has already laid the groundwork for Texas to do this kind of thing by essentially saying that partisan gerrymandering cannot be reviewed in federal court, no matter how egregious it is. They have blocked racial gerrymandering in the past, but now they're essentially saying they're allowing the state to do this. They're allowing Texas to camouflage a racial gerrymander as a partisan gerrymander, and they've given President Trump a huge victory in the war against American democracy. Berman went on to say what the Supreme Court has done is it's given Donald Trump the power of a king, and they've given themselves, SCOTUS, the power of a monarchy, because whatever happens at the lower courts, and the lower courts have consistently been striking down Trump's efforts, Trump's attacks on democracy. And many of the judges who are halting what the Trump regime is trying to do are Trump-appointed judges. Some of them are Reagan and Bush-appointed judges. But whenever they strike down what Donald Trump is doing, because it's clearly illegal, SCOTUS comes in and undoes it. In this Texas gerrymandering case, a Trump-appointed judge found that the map was racially gerrymandered to discriminate against Black and Latino voters. What the Roberts Court did was overturn that lower court opinion, just as it has overturned so many other lower court opinions, in order to rule in favor of Donald Trump and his party. And one of the most staggering things is the fact that the Roberts Court has ruled for President Trump 90% of the time in these shadow docket cases. So in all of these big issues, whether it's on voting rights or immigration or presidential powers, lower courts are constraining the president just as the Constitution intended them to do. And it is the Supreme Court that is repeatedly saying the president and his party, the Republicans, are above the law. Later in the interview, Berman says it was a really catastrophic ruling for democracy because what it said is that no matter how egregiously a state gerrymanders to try to target a political party, those claims cannot be struck down in federal court. They can't even be reviewed in federal court. And what's so egregious here is that it sets this precedent where the Supreme Court has said to any Texases out there, any folks who want to deprive people of representation in government, to deny people their constitutional right to exercise their vote and get representation, the Roberts Supreme Court has told them you can gerrymander as much as you want as long as you say that you're doing it for partisan purposes. Even if the data clearly shows you're doing it for racially motivated purposes, they're going to let you do it. SCOTUS is going to let you do it. And not just that, why are we allowing partisan gerrymandering in the first place? How is that upholding the Constitution? Why is it that SCOTUS is allowing partisan gerrymandering as a practice? What we're seeing over and over and over again is that the lower courts are standing for the rule of law. The lower courts are upholding democracy. Whether or not those judges have been appointed by Democrats or Republicans, it is the uber conservative 6 on the Supreme Court who are handing Donald Trump the power of a king, and they are actively working to destroy American democracy. And this is what I am not seeing discussed at all, basically, by other creators. The Heritage Foundation, Project 2025, the Republicans, white Christian nationalists, they've been playing the long game, and Democrats have not. We are in this situation now because elections have consequences, because people wouldn't suck it up and vote for Hillary Clinton. We are in this position now. Before you get all up in my business, I can't stand Hillary Clinton. I can't stand corporate establishment Democrats. I thought she was a terrible candidate. I understood that Donald Trump was positioning himself as an authoritarian even back then. Lots of folks were warning us, and they were laughed at and ridiculed, and they were right. Republicans were content to play the long game. They understood the lasting implications. They knew that they were not going to get their dictatorship during Trump's first term. That's cool. They were willing to wait out Joe Biden. They were willing to think years and years and years down the road and to lay the foundations to destroy democracy. They were willing to pave that road. They were willing to do that work and just be content to make incremental progress toward their goal of fascism, toward their goal of white Christian nationalism. And we didn't understand that. We are often too short-sighted on the political left. We have lofty visions and lofty goals, not so good at that strategic planning and implementation. Because I know we can't go back in time. I know there's not a lot of point in saying I told you so. Had Donald Trump not had a first term, the Supreme Court would look incredibly different today. Had Ruth Bader Ginsburg not put herself first, I know people don't like it when I criticize her, had she decided to step down when Obama was president, the court would look different. The Supreme Court has far too much power to dismantle democracy. We can talk about how maybe we shouldn't have lifetime appointments. Why is it that Joe Biden didn't expand the court? We should expand the court in the future. Yeah, okay, let's start thinking like that. Let's start thinking about what we need to do down the road. How do we play the long game? How can we be strategic like Republicans have been strategic, but not with reprehensible, god-awful fascist plans, but with pro-democracy plans to give civil rights, human rights, dignity, a good quality of life to everybody here? For me, the takeaway is not we're cooked, SCOTUS has destroyed democracy, they are determined to make Donald Trump a king. For me, the takeaway is we need to think in terms of the long game, in terms of slowly implementing our plans, in terms of slowly infiltrating the authoritarian state, eroding it, and installing democracy once again. Maybe for the first time, right? We have to think about how we systematically dismantle this kleptocracy. How is it that we get better at planning so that we can outmaneuver these guys? They outmaneuvered us. In permaculture, there really is no such thing as waste. There's no such thing as losing. There are just problems for which we still need to craft a solution. We have to be solution-minded. So me reading this SCOTUS ruling, yeah, I had a little bit of a meltdown last night over it, but it just says to me, okay, what do we need to do to respond? What do we need to do to be more successful than these fuckers? What do we need to do to dig ourselves out of this? How is it that we go forward learning how to play the long game? Because John Roberts sure did, and we're better than him. We're better.